Does really your diet control your immune system's ability to fight off something like the cold or the flu?
But we still have more unknowns than we have knowns, but we do have some tantalizing details. And maybe check, I wonder if it would help if I sort of describe what the heck the immune system is.
By
Because
all means.
for some people, it's kind of a vague notion. Um, you draw a blood sample, and you look at your blood. What you see under a microscope is all these red blood cells, the little inner tubes, all looking red. And their whole job is to carry oxygen to your body tissue. But here and there, mixed with them, are white blood cells. And their job is not to carry oxygen. They are the soldiers of the body. They are there to defend you. And what they're looking for is a virus or a bacterium that somehow got into you, and they're going to knock it out. They also look for things like cancer cells. They say, that's not right. We got to get rid of that too. And they have their own ways of getting rid of these invaders. A strong white blood cell can recognize a foreign invader, make antibodies, which are just protein torpedoes, if I can use that word, that will knock out that invader. And some of the white blood cells have the capacity to actually engulf the virus, swallow it whole, and tear it apart. Now, what if your white blood cells are just not very numerous? You don't have very many. You got a weak immune system. What if you've got them, but they're just not doing their job? What if you're taking a drug that's stopping up from working? All of those things can contribute. And when we look at people who are susceptible to infection, because they don't have a good immune system, they are often people who have been intentionally immune. Why? Because you got a kidney transplant. And that kidney is from somebody else. And if you have a really vigorous immune system, it will reject the kidney or a heart transplant or other kinds of transplants. So they might be on immune suppressant drugs. If a person has had HIV, this wiry HIV virus disables the immune system. That's what made HIV a killer. It's an immunodeficiency virus. And there are a number of medications that are for less life-threatening things. Rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, even skin conditions. You'll see them advertised on TV here, biologicals, that work by subtly disabling your immune system so that your autoimmune arthritis feels better, but you're not vulnerable to all kinds of things. So, Chuck, anyway, that's what the immune system is for. And then your question is like a very good one. What the heck does food have to do with it? And so researchers have started to look at that. There are certain things that seem to impede our immune strength. Fat is a classic example. Researchers have done a number of studies looking at how fatty junk in the diet might affect the white blood cells' ability to work. Bottom line, white cells don't work so hot in an oil slick. And then certain additions to the diet. There's garlic help, there's vitamin C help, there's zinc help. All of these things have been under study. All of them get kind of a qualified possibly, but hopefully we'll be able to tease out how those work.
Yeah, I think that we will be able to. We're going to get into some specific foods here in just a little bit, but I want to say hi to Janice, who's watching us in Canada, Tofu Tuesday, who's here with us on a Wednesday. Rick Snyder checking in from Southern Maryland. Rick, glad you're here, my friend. I've been enjoying your columns for years. Dr. Barnard, my first question, though, comes to us today from Jamie, and Jamie wants to know about specific foods. Indeed, what are the best foods that can help to boost the immune system?
I can tell you some of the things that have been suspects, or that's not the right word, it's kind of negative word. Whatever the positive version of a suspect is. Garlic is one that people have studied. And not this these studies were ongoing way before anybody ever heard of a coronavirus causing an infection. What the viruses that they were looking at then was not the SARS-CoV-2, it was the cold virus. And there was a really interesting study done in the UK. They brought in a large group of people, 146. Half of them got a garlic supplement. The other half got a pill that looked just like the garlic supplement, but it was a placebo. And then they asked everybody, you're taking our supplement, not knowing which one it is, and keeping track of your colds. How often do you get a cold? If you get it, write it down. And what they showed is that in the placebo group, over the 12-week period that they racked up 65 colds in that group. But in the garlic group, it wasn't 65, it was down to 24. Okay, chalk it up to garlic. And then they looked at, are you so sick that you just can't go to work? Because you might have one cold, but it might knock you out for a week, or maybe it's just a passing thing. And the placebo group got 366 sick days, and the garlic group got 111. Okay, chalk up another one for garlic. So that's all good. What's negative about this? What is negative about the first thing that's negative is it was funded by kind of the garlic industry. There's a group that's always looking at not just garlic foods, but garlic extracts, which you can sell for a fair amount of money. And whenever you have industry doing these research studies, what they sometimes are guilty of is what I call publication bias. Meaning if something worked out for them, they publish it. If it didn't, they pretend it never happened. The other thing I have to say is that anything people really like, whether it's chocolate or alcohol or whatever it is, the studies tend to wax positive. Everyone wants to say they're good. And again, it's a kind of publication bias that people like good news about things. So I think garlic is going to be number one because there are there is at least some evidence for it. Other studies have gone in the same direction. Apart from that, I'm not going to pick out specifically because a diet rich in vegetables overall, fruits overall, beans, grains, plant-based diets have been associated with a much better response to a COVID infection. In other words, if COVID comes in, you got it, your immune system is trying to fight back. If you have been on a plant-based diet, your likelihood of severe COVID is cut way down, and that's got to be because the diet is boosting immunity. Is it a specific food? No, it's the diet overall.
Jacqueline checking in from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Hello, Jacqueline. And we also have Joel in Goodyear, Arizona. Thanks for watching us, my friend. Let's flip the script. So we just talked about some foods, garlic specifically, that can help. But now let's look at the other side of the coin, Dr. Barnard. Take a question from Kelly. What foods then can actually weaken the immune system?
Researchers have really been looking at fatty foods in general, and they've done this in a few different ways. You can feed people fatty meals. Come into the laboratory. Let's feed you either a lot of animal fat or even just sort of a lot of fried foods, oily foods. And then you take a blood sample and you can separate out the white cells, you can count them in culture. You can see how well they're able to knock out an invader. And not just a virus or a bacterium, you can test them with, say, a cancer cell. And can they engulf it and destroy it? And you can then go further. You can actually take blood cells themselves and administer fat directly into the cell culture, the cell sample, in different quantities and different types. And the results are pretty consistent between these studies and some other really quite heroic studies where you bring in volunteers and you actually inject them intravenously with fatty lipid infusion. They all show about the same thing, which is that your white blood cells just, as I say, don't work well in the oil stuff. The fattier your diet, the harder time your white blood cells have to, whether it's producing antibodies or engulfing invaders. Fat in general is a bad thing. The reason I emphasize that is a lot of people will think animal fat's bad. They are right. It is every bit as bad as you thought. But they're thinking, well, if it's olive oil, it's got to be better. That's true too. It's always better than chicken fat. But best of all is a really low-fat vegan diet without a lot of extra fat.
Well, let's apply what it was that you were just saying here to some more popular diets like Bulletproof or Keto. Michael is wondering specifically then, could a high-fat, low-carb diet make you more susceptible to becoming sick?
Yes. In fact, there was a stunning study that came out less than a month ago, and it was looking at healthcare workers who were following different kinds of diet. And this is a study that showed substantial benefits when it comes to health. There was a similar study that came out almost the same time. More than 500,000 participants who were simply tracking what they ate and tracking their COVID experience. Both of these suggested plant-based diet was going to be good. However, People also look at just what you were asking about, ketogenic diet, low carb diet. These are the diets where people are avoiding an apple, piece of bread, cookies. Some of these are healthy, like apples, and some not so healthy, like cookies. But the groups on the low carbohydrate diet did decisively worse. They had about, if I recall correctly, something like about a 40% increased risk of severe COVID infection. Makes perfect sense. If you're not eating carbohydrates, what are you eating? Meat, gravy, cheese, and your immune system hates those foods just as much as your coronary arteries do.
And we had an opportunity on a recent show to go back and dive into those studies in depth. And that was one of the more popular shows that we've done in the last few months, well over 100,000 views. So if you have the opportunity, go onto the Physicians Committee's YouTube channel and look for COVID-19 and plant-based diets. Watch that. And Dr. Barnard, you did a magnificent job going in depth, explaining those studies for everyone. So thank you for doing that. Can't recommend that show enough. Okay. Let's talk about inflammation. This is a big one. You talk about inflammation and how beneficial a plant-based diet can be for that. So let's take a question from Dana at 1212. Can lowering inflammation help with the immune system?
Yes, it can. But here again, inflammation is not entirely a bad thing. Inflammation is really your body's response to injury. So if you're responding appropriately to injury, that's good. If you are over-responding, you're doing too much, that's not good. I'll tell you what I mean. A mosquito attacks you, or a bee attacks you. What do they do? They sting you. And some of their proteins get into your skin, and your body detects it. Within just seconds, your body says, okay, invader alert, we got a problem. And you notice that your skin is turning red, and it's kind of puffing up and swelling. That's not something that the mosquito or the bee did. That's something your body did. What's happening is the white blood cells recognize the invader. They release chemicals that cause your blood vessels to open up. That's why it's red. But what they're trying to do is to let the blood vessels open up so that your ability to attack and clean up that junk that has arrived in you can increase. So your blood vessels become weak. These little chemical soldiers go into the interstitial spaces and clean up the junk and carry it away. That's why you're turning red, you're puffing up, it's swelling. That's a little battleground in your skin. Hopefully, it doesn't spread. But there are times where foods we eat trigger this process. So it's not a bee sting, it's something on your plate. Cheese sandwich. The proteins that came out of the cow get into your body says, wait, there's a foreign invader here. It's not a bee sting, but it's cow protein. Your body says that doesn't belong here. The inflammatory processes kick in, and they're not just attacking one little spot on your skin, they're attacking your blood vessels, your brain. They're circulating in your bloodstream. Wherever your blood goes, they go. And this has really been a huge issue. We've been looking at depression. Depression is not entirely bad childhood, lost job, that kind of stuff. Yeah, those things contribute. Depression is partly physical. And inflammation affects the mood in a huge way. So say if you can tackle that excess inflammation, it would be better. Okay, come back to COVID. We learned as soon as COVID arrived that people who had a greater tendency towards excess inflammation did worse. They could not mount a selective response against the invading virus. And so that's part of why when a person's really sick and they're in the ICU, one of the things that somebody that will do is give them steroids. You just disable that immune over-response. You can also do the same thing with diet, but in a good way. Plant-based diets, anti-inflammatory. Animal-based diets, pro-inflammatory. So that's basically the thing you want to shut down that excess inflammation. The diet will help you to do that.
Got a global audience today. You'll see checking us out in San Jose, California, but then we also have Abigail watching today from the Philippines, and Kate, who's joining us from the UK. So hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. Dr. Barnard, here's a really good question from Melissa Goddard. Comes to us at 12:09. Is a low white blood cell count common on a whole food plant-based diet, and would this be a concern then for getting a COVID vaccine?
Is it common? Yes. Very, very commonly when people have sort of high levels of inflammation, they're going to help your diet, and your white blood cell soldiers say, I guess we don't need quite so many of us because we're healthy enough. So white blood cells will often diminish a bit. However, there are norms. If you look at your lab slip, there is a number that's too high and a number that's too low. And with most of the blood indices, we're often looking for things that are in the normal range, sometimes sort of toward the lower end of normal, but within the normal range. Your doctor can look at your numbers and should look at your numbers and should interpret that for you because you want to be in the healthy range.
All right, question from Ashley. I think turmeric has come up once or twice already. What spices can help to boost the immune system?
Yeah, funny you mentioned turmeric. Turmeric is one of these things that for millennia has been used for culinary reasons, partly for taste, partly for the color, and it's also been used in clothing and lots of things. And somewhere along the line, scientists got their hands on it, and they decided to study it for its medicinal purposes, and there have been quite a number of studies on turmeric, and it does seem to be anti-inflammatory. That said, I don't think it's going to put pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories out of business because its effects are, for most people, mild. The second thing is, I think it's useful to remember that publication bias can also rear its head here too. In other words, people want to cheerlead for turmeric. So they publish studies showing it works, and if a study doesn't show it, then they don't publish it. So I think there is a publication bias there for turmeric and other spices too. But all in all, I'm persuaded by the good quality of a number of these studies showing that there is an anti-inflammatory effect. It's also been studied for lots of other things. Probably the other notable one is ginger. And it's been used not so much for infections, but for things like rheumatoid arthritis and other autoimmune diseases. Some effectiveness, not earth-shattering, but you'll see.
Danielle, follow up here. Other than vitamin C, what nutrients are good for revving up the old immune system?
Well, maybe let's take a minute on vitamin C. Very controversial. Linus Pauling, 2 Nobel Prizes. He was really a huge advocate for vitamin C. And you don't need much vitamin C in your diet, but he was so enthusiastic at the time he finally died. He was taking about 18 grams a day. Don't try this at home. It's huge. His point was that if cold viruses are around, you're not going to get as sick, maybe not sick at all, if you've been taking vitamin C. And he says take it as a supplement because the amount in an orange or green vegetables, not so huge. Does it work? Definite maybe there. There was a good study that looked at rather modest supplementation, about 200 milligrams of vitamin C. And for context, if you go to the pharmacy and you look at the pills they sell, they'll be about 500 milligrams, sometimes 1,000. This is just 200. And it was only 4 weeks, a 4-week study. But it was in older folks who were subject to bronchial pneumonia, meaning lung infection. And it did show that, in fact, the vitamin C, in addition to whatever other treatments they were getting, did help them clinically, did improve them. Side effects of a tiny dose like that, really slim to none. So I think vitamin C is something that gets a cautious thumbs up. There have been negative studies too, but I think overall, I think the evidence is something that's stable. Vitamin D is an interesting one. People have really dug into vitamin D a lot. Its main role has nothing to do with immunity. It has to do with protecting the calcium balance. Vitamin D helps to absorb calcium from the food. But it is a cancer preventive to a degree. People who are vitamin D deficient are at some risk for higher cancer, and we're assuming that's because their immune system isn't so alert to cancer cells. Well, does this help us with something like a respiratory infection like COVID? With COVID, I don't think we have good evidence yet. But with other respiratory infections that preceded COVID, there was some evidence that when people would take vitamin D supplementation in a randomized trial compared to placebo, they were at reduced risk for respiratory infection. So cautious benefit there, probably not huge. unless if you've got a really low vitamin D level, you've not been supplementing, you haven't been getting any sunlight, for you, I'm going to bet that a vitamin D supplementation will have a much greater effect. Finally, maybe one other nutrient you just mentioned really quickly, that's zinc. Zinc has been studied for all kinds of things. I'm cautious about it because it is a metal, like iron, like copper. And there's one thing we learned a long time ago. You need a little bit of copper, you don't want a lot because it's so awesome. You need a little bit of iron, you don't want a lot. Same story. Zinc is in that same category, but researchers in Michigan looked at people, they gave them zinc, they compared them to a placebo, and they did show a reduced risk of respiratory infections with zinc. My own suggestion, I would not supplement with it, I would just go high plant-based diet and get the natural deficit. Do that, you will not trigger it.
All right, so it seems like some people, you get sick and they just stay sick for what seems like forever. Other people, they get sick and within a day or two, they've got all the spring back in their step. Laura wants to know, can eating a healthy diet help you recover faster when you do get sick?
Yeah, absolutely. And the studies on COVID, and frankly, like the studies on vaccination, maybe that's a good example. If you take a vaccinated person and you compare that person to an unvaccinated person, if COVID comes around, they're on an elevator, people all around them are sneezing, and the virus comes into them, they inhale it. They're both going to get the virus. Even if you've been vaccinated, that virus enters your body. The vaccine doesn't somehow stay at your nasal opening by itself. It's coming into your body. What the vaccine does is it causes your body to be prepared for it, so that your immune response wells up. Your white blood cells say, I knew you were coming because I was vaccinated and I'm ready to knock you out. So it just knocks it out sooner before it multiplies. The unvaccinated person inhales the virus. Their immune system has never seen it before. So it's like trying to wake up and saying, what is this new thing? I don't know. It takes much longer for the immune system to raise a response. So your question is, if I'm eating in a healthier way, will that allow me to knock out the sickness that I've got that much faster? My analogy with the vaccination is that, let's say you've been following a healthy plant-based diet, rich in healthy micronutrients, very low in fat, your white blood cells are naturally healthy. And so they are better able to mount a good, swift response and kick that virus out. So yes, your recovery is going to be faster. And to tie a bow on this, what if you were vaccinated and you're following a healthy diet? It turns out that those people who are vaccinated and do well with it are the people who typically are not overweight, don't have hypertension, don't have high cholesterol levels. If you vaccinate them, you get a good, robust immune response. People who are vaccinated and are overweight, have hypertension, have high cholesterol levels, mostly diet-driven. You can vaccinate them, and some of them do okay, but a lot of them just don't mount a very good vaccine response. Their immune system just can't protect them very well. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. If the virus comes in, it infects you. Healthy diet is likely to help you recover more rapidly. This does not mean that you don't take care of yourself and don't get medical care. It's only that.
Yeah, well, let's apply this with something like a sinus infection, okay? So not just talking COVID-19 here, but like a sinus infection. When I was still overweight, I had a routine. Go to the doctor's office when I'm sick and get the prescription, take that to the pharmacy, and while that prescription is being filled, then go to the drive-thru and then swing back by to pick up the medication. So if I'm going home and I'm eating that Big Mac and fries, that comfort food because I'm not feeling all that great, you know, how much is that going to slow the recovery process from something like the sinus infection as opposed to what you were talking about, COVID-19?
We see this a lot with dairy products. Dairy products are often associated with sinus infections and all the way down the respiratory tree, from the sinuses to the lungs. And so when people are consuming a lot of dairy products, some people have assumed that it's because they're making more lung secretions, perhaps. Maybe so. But when these people get away from dairy products, they have far fewer sinus infections. less asthma. Sometimes the asthma goes away. And in their little baby who is 5 months old, those ear infections that keep recurring and recurring and recurring, and when you get away from the dairy-based formulas, the babies often do better. So yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's take a question from Kalafani here at 1220. We were talking about inflammation. Kalafani's wondering whether there's a test specifically for inflammation.
There are a number of them. You go to the doctor and you say, am I inflamed? The doctor, one of the things the doctor is going to look at is called C-reactive protein. And there's a high sensitivity CRP that they'll order. And your doctor will draw that. And by the way, you don't have to be infected to have a high CRP level. A lot of people have it. And they will be impressed that when they clean up their diet, go to a healthy plant-based diet, their CRP levels often cascade downwards, just like their cholesterol and their blood pressure and their blood sugar, all these things very often get better. There are more sophisticated tests that doctors can do for more specific conditions, but CRP is where the laboratory starts.
Let's see here. Housekeeping questions. Switch a little bit. Take one from Kathy. This is a different one, but Kathy wants to know what happens when you go a year without vitamin B12. Said, I went vegan about a year ago, haven't been taking it. What kind of nerve damage might I be facing?
We're going to pause the show now. Drive to the health food store. Get your B12, swallow one, come back and answer the You need B12. B12 is something you need for healthy nerves and healthy blood. Absolutely essential for everybody. If you don't have B12 in your system, you can't make it. You just aren't going to have healthy blood health. Now, it's not made by animals. It's not made by plants. It's made by bacteria. And so some people would say that before the advent of modern hygiene, the bacteria that were in the soil or on the plants that we might pull from the soil or on our fingertips or in our mouths, they might make the tiny traces of B12 we need. And maybe that's true, but that's definitely not true now in the modern hygienic world. And so meat eaters get some B12. And the B12 came from bacteria in the animal's gut. The cow doesn't make it, but the gut bacteria will make it. So it will get into the meat, get into the milk. But even they can become deficient. Most of the people who are low in B12 in the hematology clinic are meat eaters. Why are they low? Because they're over 50 and they're not making enough stomach acid to pull the B12 off the meat protein. Or they're on an acid-blocking drug. Or they're on metformin, which is the most commonly prescribed drug for type 2 diabetes, because it interferes with B12 absorption. So a lot of reasons for people running low. So, in my view, everybody should take B12. Take the smallest one that you can get. Go to the store, get 100 micrograms, 200, maybe 500. It's bigger than that, you take it every other day, or you cut it down. But I haven't had it for a year. It's going to hurt me. The answer is yeah, it can. Sometimes the first effects are nerve damage. It can be irreversible. So don't go along with it. You can also get tested. Your doctor can test you. It's very easy to do for your B12 level and activity. But don't play around with it. Do get supplemented. That is true for babies, true for children, true for breastfeeding moms, true for everybody.
Let's take another one, cleaning up some of these miscellaneous questions that are in the mailbag here. One from Peter. We've been talking about white blood cells, but Peter's wondering about red blood cells. Wants to know, are there any plant foods to increase red blood cells to help with running and oxygen? That one comes in at 1222.
What a neat question. This is sort of the idea of how where athletes would withdraw some of their own blood and inject it later before the athletic event, and hoping that they didn't get found out for sort of biological doping. I'm not aware of foods that you can take that will actually increase your red blood cells. However, your body cannot have normal red blood cell function. A, without B12, which we talked about. B, without iron. Now, you don't need iron from liver. That was the 1950s idea. Or red meat. The reason that cows have iron in their meat is because they were eating green vegetables. They were eating grass. And if you eat green vegetables, not grass, but kale and broccoli and all the green vegetables, they are rich in a really good form of iron. It's called non-heme iron. And the reason I like it so much is that if you are low in iron, your body will absorb more. If you've got a lot of iron already, your body will absorb less. It's the kind that your homeostatic mechanism can regulate. If, on the other hand, you decide to have iron from liver, or from maybe some old-fashioned doctor or dietitian said, I'd have some red meat if I were you. The problem is that's all chemo. You can't regulate the absorption of it. If you already have plenty of iron in your system, you'll still absorb it. And then it becomes toxic. It can become toxic to the brain and toxic to the heart. So get your iron from the same place the cow gets it, and that's from plants.
Okay, interesting question. We've got time for just a couple of more. This one came in at 12:15. We were talking about fat and the immune system and the connection there. Well, let's talk about a plant-based food that has some fat to it, that being nuts. This one coming in at 12:15. I've heard that nuts boost the immune system. Is that true?
If it is true, I do not know of any evidence that says so, with one exception, and that's that nuts have to be a good source of vitamin E. And vitamin E does have, it will protect your cells. Vitamin E is an antioxidant, and it keeps cells from being destroyed prematurely. So it will make your white blood cells last a little bit longer. And by the way, if you're looking for vitamin E, do not get it in a capsule. Don't go to the store and take out your wallet and credit card and pay a lot of dough for vitamin E supplements. The reason to not do that is that if you eat a couple of almonds or some walnuts, there are 8 different natural forms of vitamin E, and you'll get all of them from food. Go to the store, they can call it vitamin E if it only has 1 or 2. And that will do you more harm than good, because if you overdo it on one form of vitamin E, it will suppress your absorption of all of the others. So if you get them from food, you get them in nature's balance. Don't go crazy with it. If you have a lot of nuts, you're going to have more than you need of these things, and you're getting fat along with it, which, as we were saying earlier, is going to suppress the meat.
All right, miscellaneous question, 12:22. A day in my life is their name. Wondering, should they eat organic beans, or is it okay to eat beans that are not organic?
Beans of any type are always better than the meat that they replace in the chili. So if you throw out the meat, you're having beans, organic, non-organic, fine. Always dramatically better. But beans are not a food where, when they are raised non-organic, this is not a particularly pesticide-heavy food. That said, I think if you can get organic, I would always get organic. But if you can't, go for the ones that you can buy.
All right, and Gail.